Work besties, we've got a good one today, a spicy one, potentially controversial, depends who you ask. One that has been a topic in the media now for a few years. It's surrounding the 40-hour work week, the 4-day work week. What are we gonna see in the future? Are we ever gonna get to a point where we're gonna see the 4-hour work week, imagine, the 4-day work week as a norm globally? I don't know, but let's talk about it. Let's start here with a little bit of the history of the 40-hour work week. I went on a bit of a deep dive, my team and I, to try to figure out where 40 hours even really came from. And we found a little bit of history, specifically in the US, as to how 40 hours became the magic number that we somehow landed on, that we said, okay, 40 hours a week we're gonna dedicate to work. That's the ideal number we need to see from a human to be, I don't even know, productive, to validate, Anyways, let's start from the beginning. No, not like the beginning. We're gonna go back to 1817, throw it back just a little bit. It was in the Industrial Revolution. What did we see here? Work weeks were close to 80 to 100 hours at that time. 80 to 100, can you imagine? I'm like, I complain about a 40-hour work week sometimes, 80 to 100. Of course, activists and labor unions were advocating for better working experiences, better working conditions, just all over better work, better work life. Now we're gonna jump forward to 1866, which apparently is a very significant year because the concept of the 8-hour workday was brought to the US Congress by the National Labor Union, founded in 1866, dissolved in 1873. Not a super long labor union, that one. Fast forward 3 years to 1869, we saw the guaranteed 8-hour workday for government employees was issued, and the decision encouraged the private sector to also push for similar rights. And then in 1886, we saw the mandatory 8-hour workday law passed by Illinois legislature, and employer pushback led to a massive work strikes through Chicago. What a time that would have been to be alive. We have this 8-hour workday law passed and employers are like, hold up, no, we want people to work way more than that. And then employees are probably like, but it's law. And then we saw a little tension and then they were like, we're gonna go on strike. So 1926, we saw the 40-hour work week popularized by Henry Ford. And Ford's progressive policies for reduced hours and increased pay led to boosted productivity. Shocking. Maybe when people are like working less and able to have more holistic, well-rounded life and maybe like rest and take a beat from work for a minute, we see productivity skyrocket. Great to see. And worker loyalty. And many manufacturing automotive companies soon followed suit with this. In 1938, the Fair Labor Standard Act was passed by the US Congress, which set the requirement for employees or employers to pay overtime for those working more than 44 hours a week. It was amended 2 years later, reducing the work week to 40 hours officially. And then in 1940, the US passed a law mandating the 40-hour work week. And that's how we arrived on the 40-hour work week in the US specifically. I'm not from the US, I'm from Canada, but I feel like that we kind of followed maybe a similar path to them. I should probably look into the Canadian history with this, but I'm just gonna, so that's our little history of how 40 hours even really kind of came to be, which still doesn't give me a lot of information on like why 40 hours, like why was that? It was just the reduction from the 80 to 100 hours. Is it time for a little reassessment on is 40 hours really the optimal point, or can we still reduce that and see more boost in productivity, more boost in retention and loyalty and overall employee satisfaction? I guess that we actually are in that conversation the last couple of years, and I think we'll continue to kind of see it over the next few years of this 4-day work week idea. So let's start with the arguments for a 4-day work week, and then we'll get into the arguments against the 4-day work week, and then we'll get into a little bit about what we've seen in the world, who's doing it, who's tested it already, who's following suit, who's hesitating a little bit to kind of introduce this. So the argument for the 4-day work week was that it's a higher no loss in productivity. So we're seeing productivity either increase or stay the same for reduced hours. Happier workers, which makes sense if you have more time off. Better environmental impact. We don't see that extra day work commute for a lot of people. That's, I guess, something that not a lot of people would think about when reducing a day of work a week, especially for companies or countries who have a more in-office approach to work these days. We're reducing environmental impact, which is awesome. The argument against this 4-day work week is that it limits time to complete necessary tasks, which I feel like that really just comes down to like a time management discussion. But anyways, this is what the internet's telling me. It's difficult to apply to healthcare and emergency services, retail, hospitality businesses, larger enterprises with complex operations. Fair. Could be more stressful trying to pack all of your workload into 4 days. Could be. Also could not be. You could just be more effective within your working hours. Jury's out on that one. Negative impact on customer satisfaction, so especially roles that are more client-facing, customer-facing, less availability to services, call centers, whatnot. Totally fair. Scheduling hurdles, team management. I guess that is a good shout on that, because it's kind of like, well, if you take all of the meetings that you have on a weekly basis and you try to now condense them into 4 days, I know a lot of people experience this at work where they're spending so much time in meetings that there's not a lot of time some days to actually do work. Not that meetings aren't work, but you know what I mean, like to sit down and get through some work that isn't involving meetings. But then I think it just kind of begs the question of like, are all these meetings really necessary? And is there opportunity to kind of like reduce the time spent in meetings? Is that really the most productive use of time? I don't necessarily think that's a negative. It's more of just a question of like, how will it impact scheduling and what can be done to make the use of time more effective? I feel like that's really more the discussion. Even if we stay a 5-hour work week, it's like, do we really need all these meetings? Are we really effectively using our employees' time? I don't know. So who's done the 4-day work week trial? What were the results? You may have seen it in the media, but in 2022, companies within the UK entered into this trial 4-day work week. And in this study, it began as a 6-month trial that had extended to 1 year. And in some cases, the companies decided to make it permanent. Foregoing the standard 5-day work week, 40-hour work week model, the participating organizations agreed to complete 100% of the usual workload in 80% of the time, shortening work weeks to 32 hours, and then pay stayed the same. So that was kind of the structure within the study. 1 year after the 61 companies in the UK opted to participate in this study, 89% of the companies continued to keep the structure in place, which I think is it's a very strong number to come out of that and be like, this actually has been working for us for the last year. So overall, they saw more efficiency, happier employees, less turnover, which I think all kind of makes sense, especially in that first year. I feel like gaining that extra day back in your personal time would have quite the impact that you'd be like, yeah, I'm gonna stick at this company for a little while. Why would I go back and work an extra day a week? So I'm curious to see if that would kind of be long-term impact or if it's more short-term. But I mean, overall, I can kind of see it being positive, more positive than negative, which is what the study was showing. Nearly 1/3, so 32% of the study said the policy had noticeably improved recruitment. So it made companies more attractive to have this 4-day work week. But I think we know that, like, flexibility attracts job seekers. And I'm trying to see here, I know I pulled a figure of, according to research from job platform Indeed, the overall number of job posts advertising a 4-day work week remains low. It's 0.3% of total active job postings are for the 4-day work week. So we're not really seeing it super common. It's kind of, you know, the needle in the haystack, the unicorn, if you will, for finding a company that is actively approaching work as the 4-day work week. But I think it's important with this study too that came out of the UK is, yes, it worked for the majority of the companies that were participating in this study. However, it didn't work for every company. So I don't necessarily think that the 4-day work week is like everyone can adopt it, it's gonna work automatically. Like, I think there are some companies, some industries where they'd face more challenges with adopting this kind of culture or with this kind of schedule. Client-facing companies faced a lot of challenges with this model specifically within the study. So, you know, for example, like a customer service call center, support in that sense, it's really hard to kind of say, let's do it across the whole company, yet this division of the company can't really do it, or in order for them to do it, we're gonna have to hire a bunch more, it's gonna have scheduling conflicts, it's gonna be less consistent experience than, let's say, you know, our finance department or our marketing department, who can, you know, more unifiedly go, yeah, Monday to Thursday we're gonna work and we'll have Friday off, or however they structured it. There would be additional challenges with that, absolutely, depending on the company itself. And I was reading an article and it said, it was from one of the companies who didn't have a great experience and didn't continue this 4-day work week after this trial. And it was, if we can't create a unified experience amongst or across all employees within the organization, until we can get to a point where we can solve for that, we're gonna stay with the 5-day work week, which is an interesting point, because on one hand, it's like, yes, every division, every employee should have a similar experience or kind of see the similar shift. But on the other hand, does it then come down to what kind of job you work and if that's available for you, and you kind of have to adjust within the company, different departments, different work experiences? Because I think from the outside looking in, it makes sense to be like, oh yeah, if you work at company A, the experience should be the same as anyone else at company A. But in reality, and like what I've learned throughout my career and talking to other people within their industries, within their companies, your experience at a company can be so dependent on your department, on your manager, on the project you're working on. So you could have such a wildly different experience in company A than someone else who works a different role under a different leadership within company A. I think trying a solution for everyone in a company and saying we won't do this until it works for everyone, kind of a cop-out a little bit, because I don't think that in any company you can guarantee the same experience across the board. I don't know, I go back and forth on that one. What do you think? I just don't know if that's ever gonna be something that can be rectified, or it's something where, yeah, you're just gonna have to put more resources in a certain department to adapt to a 4-day work week. I don't know, I'm conflicted. I keep going back and forth in my brain. But anyways, point of this was the companies that saw less of success with this were more client-facing, customer-facing. They saw a business limitation, whether that's their accessibility to their customers, to their clients, the experience from a customer perspective of being able to access their point of contact at a company. There was quite a few challenges in that sense. Germany has become the latest testing ground for the 4-day work week. They're continuing trials outside of the UK. Like, this was just one specific trial, but Germany's become the latest. They started in February, I believe, and it includes 45 companies. Belgium introduced a 4-day work week for employees who would like it. They became the first country in Europe to legislate for a 4-day work week. Interesting. In February of 2022, Belgian employees won the right to perform a full work week in 4 days instead of the usual 5 without any loss of salary. Curious how much that's been adopted across companies. If you're from Belgium, let me know. How's that been for y'all? Portugal's trialing a 4-day work week. Scotland and Wales are joining the growing global movement with their own kind of pilots. Spain has apparently started a trial phase. Iceland was one of the leaders of the 4-day working week, and between 2015 and 2019, Iceland conducted the world's largest pilot of a 35 to 36 hour work week. Sweden has mixed reactions, apparently, to the 4-day work week. 4-day work week with full pay was tested in 2015 there with apparently very mixed results. And this is interesting. So I was looking at articles and reading through them and just kind of headlines of like who's doing what. And there was one that says, strong interest in the US and in Canada. Okay. This is what it says. According to a survey by cloud software vendor Qualtrics, a whopping 92% of US workers are in favor of the shortened work week. So US workers, not companies, even if it means working longer hours. That was the only article I found about a 4-day work week, trialing, being interested, that said, even if it means working longer hours. Because at the start of the discussion, I was like, okay, 4-day work week, you're still working your 8 hours a day. Fine, yeah. And this is when it got me thinking, like, could we really have a 4-day work week in North America? I think it starts with the culture. Saying we're doing a 4-day work week and putting that into policy is one thing, but then actually having employees and culture follow this, I think potentially might be where the biggest hurdle is, because there are so many people who already work 6-7 days a week on a 5-day work week. You know what I mean? And so if you don't have a culture who's going to back this through behavior and habits and practice what they preach, if they're preaching the 4-day work week, it's not going to be sustainable over the long run. Yeah, sure, you might have a 4-day work week, but you also might get this pressure or this guilt to log on in addition to those 4 days. You know what I mean? And so I just thought that was interesting that the article specifically talking about North America, it said that employees would be fine even working 10-hour workdays, like 4 10-hour workdays. And I guess that comes to my next question for you is, would you still want a 4-day work week if it was 10-hour days? So 4 10-hour days a week, or would you prefer 5 8-hour days a week? If 40 hours isn't off the table, would you condense it into days? And my mind goes, I guess, 2 directions. One, it goes, well, if I had a 10-hour workday, that's all I'm doing that day. That does not leave me a lot of time for pre-work activities or post-work activities. It's basically 4 days of just work. And then, life stuff too, like eating and sleeping and all that fun stuff. Or would I have my 5 days of work and then still have some time, like still have those additional 2 hours every day in the evenings to do things. 3-day weekends or 3 days off a week to have a life, or 2 full days off a week for my life plus evenings. Like I go back and forth so much on that. I'm like, what would I really like? And I've had some people too reach out to me and say, 4 10-hour days is great. I would take it any day over 8-hour days. I'm like, great. That works for you and that's perfect. I don't know if I'd be sold on that. And also it's so funny that that's the only place I've really heard that discussion is in North America about like, okay, we could go to a 4-day work week, but like 10 hours. Everywhere else is like, you work less hours, in 4 days and with the same amount of workload for the same amount of pay. I thought that was funny when I was going through everything. And then another question I have too, and this is something that I try to ask people when they have experienced the 4-day work week, is what day of the week do you have off? Because initially my brain goes, Friday or Monday, but then I'm like, a Wednesday would be nice to have off. Or do we like a 3-day weekend? In your ideal world, if you're working 4 days a week, what day would you have off in addition to your Saturday, Sunday? What day would that be? And is there an optimal day? Has there been studies and research into what day is the best for employees? Is there a certain day that's best for employers? I don't know. This conversation leaves me with so many questions because I can see us getting to a point where a 4-day work week is feasible and it's sustainable and it's adopted into cultures. I think, certain working cultures would be easier to adopt than others, hence the companies that seem to be embracing it a little more versus just like talking about it and not really implementing it. But I think culture plays a huge factor into it as well. I think maybe we could get to a point where we're in a 4-day work week kind of universally, and maybe, 100 years from now, people look back in history and we're part of like that shift and change kind of period in time where we're shifting again the working hours from that 40 hours that we saw kind of come into law in 1940 in the States. I just have I don't know if I'm skeptical. I just think it really comes down to like a culture. And that being able to reinforce things, especially throughout North America. And from what I've heard, Europe is just different in general in terms of the work culture and how work is prioritized in life. And even when it comes down to like how many paid days off a year there are, it seems like quite a different experience than what North America is kind of facing. I feel like when I started this discussion, I was like, oh yeah, 4-day work week, I'm really clear. And as I've been going through this, I'm kind of like, I have so many questions. Like, is this possible? Do you foresee this in the future? And if so, how close in the future could we really see it just be a universal standard for the 4-day work week? I've even seen interest. I was reading an article the other day and there was interest in Japan for the 4-day work week. And Japan, I believe, still has one of the highest, if not the highest, death rate due to overworking. And so if countries like Japan are looking into the 4-day work week to kind of combat that crisis, or just in general kind of see if you can maintain or increase productivity with reducing hours. I'm curious to see if a lot of other countries within the world are going to start to embrace this. And it's really, been led by Europe and the UK at this point. I've never left a YouTube video more confused than I am right now. Like my brain is just like the logical side, and then like 4-day work weeks, it makes sense from like let's be honest. How many hours within the workday are you really productive? And how many days of the week are you really productive? Like if you really sat down and you were like, okay, I know all of the work that's on my plate, my workload. How much time or how many days would I really need to complete this? Like if we all took a hard look at how productive we are every single hour and what we really needed to complete it, would you be like, no, I don't need 40 hours in 5 days? Or would you be like, yeah, I absolutely would? Like, I'm curious to know what you think you could do your job in and maintain the same quality of output, the same efficiency within your job, hitting your deliverables and everything like that. Because I could definitely do it in less than 5 days. I think when I take a hard look at things, like 4 days, like 4 solid days, I could do it. Absolutely. I think a big challenge would be no, it wouldn't be a challenge, because if everyone was kind of on the same page about the 4-day work week, then it wouldn't be a challenge. I'm just thinking like, well, if I did 4-day work week, but a lot of the clients and people I work with were still on 5 days, that could have a lot of scheduling issues. But if everyone kind of adopted it, oh my gosh, I'm going through a rabbit hole in my head. I'm just like spiraling down. I have so many questions. Is this possible? I think yes, if it starts at the core, of culture, and we see a culture shift, and we see it like wildly accepted. Do you believe we can get to a point across the globe, for the most part, where we're gonna see 4-day work weeks become the norm? Let me know in the comments section. I hope I've confused you as much as I've confused myself in this conversation of going back and forth. I think that it is time for me to log off and go take a beat and just, touch a tree or something. And thanks for being here, as always, work besties. I appreciate you. I appreciate these conversations. I love reading the comment section because there's always just so much different experience, different thought, different work perspectives that come into play that I probably haven't thought of, or people that have experienced the 4-day work week. Maybe that's you. Let us know how it's been going. Was it something that's been adopted in the company really well? How was the transition from 5-day to 4? How was that received? Were there a little bit of road bumps along the way? Let me know. I'm very excited to read about it, but thank you for being here, and we'll see you in the next video. Toodaloo.